In this video, I will be showing you how to graph quadratics and use their graphs to apply to real-world situations. The standard form of a quadratic is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. For example, you could have something like 3x squared plus x minus 1. You could have 5x squared plus 2. And the reason this is considered a standard form is it can be written as 5x squared plus 0x plus 2, to where a is 5, b is 0, and c is 2. To graph a quadratic, in order to graph these quadratics, first it is always going to begin with x squared as your parent function. It begins at 0, 0, and it is a parabola. If it is a negative in front of the x squared, then the parabola is going to be facing down. If it is a positive, then the parabola will be going up from there. The vertex is the lowest or highest point of a quadratic. So for example here, this is the minimum value because this coordinate point is the lowest value of this parabola. In this case, the parabola has a maximum value because this coordinate point is the highest that it will go. So if the parent function has a negative in front, then you will have a maximum value. If the parent function has a positive coefficient in front of the leading degree, then it is going to be a minimum value. The vertex and axis of symmetry of a parabola, we talked about a minute ago where a minimum and maximum value happens. That is called the vertex, and in this case, this vertex is the coordinate point 2, 3. From 0, 0, you would move over 2 and up 3, which is why you would have this vertex point. The axis of symmetry is the line that divides a parabola into two equal parts. This is a symmetric parabola, meaning whatever happens on the left-hand side also happens on the right-hand side. And all parabolas will have an axis of symmetry, meaning whatever is on the left will mirror what is on the right. So to identify the vertex and axis of symmetry of a graph, for example, in this case, you would find the lowest or the highest point. In this case, we found a minimum value. And the vertex of that minimum value is the coordinate point -2, +1, because you moved left 2 and up 1. The axis of symmetry is the vertical line that goes down it passes through the coordinate point of the vertex. So in this case, the axis of symmetry is the equation x equals -2. It is not the point -2, it's actually x equals -2 because it's a vertical line. So you do need to write x equals -2. To graph any standard form of a parabola or a quadratic, basically, the first thing you're going to do is locate you're going to figure out whether the parabola is going to open up or it's going to open down. So the graph will open up if A is positive, meaning if A is positive, then the graph will go up in some way. The graph opens down if A is negative. So for example, if the A is a negative value, the graph will go down. The x coordinate of the vertex, so if you're looking for the vertex point, which is the minimum or the maximum, then you are going to use the formula -b divided by 2a. For example, if we had y equals 2x squared plus 8x minus 10, the vertex, a is 2 in this case, b is 8, and c is -10. The vertex would be -b, b is 8, divided by 2a. So you would have -8 over 4, which is -2. That is the x value of the coordinate point of the vertex. The y coordinate is found by plugging in the x coordinate. So if I plug -2 back into this equation, I will find the y value of my vertex. The axis of symmetry is always going to be x equals my x coordinate. In this case, my x coordinate is -2, and so that becomes my axis of symmetry. The y-intercept is where does it cross the y-axis. So for example, it crosses the y-axis there, and then it crosses the y-axis there at this point. And to find that y-intercept, you plug the number 0 in for x. So in this case, the y-intercept, if you plug in 0, you'll get 0 plus 0 minus 10. So the y-intercept of this coordinate point would be 0, -10. So let's do an example. We have a polynomial. We want to know, does it open up or down? Well, you look at the value in front of x squared. It is positive, so it is going to open up. We discussed at the beginning that if it opens up, it actually becomes a minimum value. Again, if it is a positive in front of the x squared and it moves up, that means this is going to be the lowest point, which becomes the minimum value. The x-coordinate of the vertex. Well, we know that A represents 1, B represents -2, and C represents -3. So to find the x-coordinate, I'm going to use the formula -b over 2a. So it'd be -b divided by 2 times a, which will give me a +2 over 2, which is 1. The y-coordinate is going to be found by plugging 1 back in. So we'll get 1 squared minus 2 times 1 minus 3. 1 minus 2 is -1, and -1 minus 3 is -4. So therefore, my vertex is the coordinate point 1, -4. So if I plot this, 1, -4 is going to go at that coordinate point right there. The axis of symmetry is x equals my x value. My x value is 1. And then the y-intercept is we plug in 0. So if we do that, we'll get 0 squared minus 2 times 0 minus 3, which will give me a -3. So my y-intercept is the coordinate point 0, -3. So 0, -3 happens here. So I now can sketch this graph knowing it's a parabola, which means it's going to be a U, and is going to go up on both sides. At this point, we're not really worried about where it's going to cross the x-axis. That will come in later videos. But at the moment, just understand that it's a U. It opened up, which made this a minimum value. And at our vertex, the axis of symmetry is a vertical line that passes through the vertex point. There is another way to be able to find the vertex using a calculator. So I'm going to move myself over there. If you pull up a calculator, if I go to y equals and I type in x squared plus 6x plus 5, and if I graph that parabola, that polynomial, if I graph that polynomial, first we know that it opens up. No, I won't do this again. Now, there's also a way to find the vertex using a calculator. So the first thing that we're going to determine is, does this open up or down? Well, we know it opens up because the number in front of x squared is positive. That also means that it is a minimum. Now, we can actually find the vertex by plugging in this equation into our y equals. Once we have plugged it in, x squared plus 6x plus 5, if you click graph, it is going to give us a parabola. Now, to find this minimum value, we're finding this vertex. What you do is hit second, trace, and we want to know the minimum value. So we're going to go down to 3 to minimum value, hit enter. It asks us 3 questions. The first question, it wants to know, it wants you to give you something on the left side of that vertex. So if you go to the left side of this parabola, anywhere close to it, hit enter. Now it wants to know the right bound. So if you go to the right side of this vertex, anywhere close, but on the right-hand side of the vertex, hit enter. And now they want to know, do you want to guess? Yes. And the value is -3, -4. The x value is -3. The y value is -4. -3, -4. We now know the axis of symmetry. It is x equals -3. And the y-intercept is if we plug in 0 for x. So 0 plus 0 plus 5 will get us 0, 5. And so we know that at -3, -4, we have a coordinate point. We have the axis of symmetry. We know that it crosses at 0, 5. So from this point, we will be able to graph a U, sort of, that looks like that. Real-world connection. The equation of the motion of a projectile fired straight up at an initial velocity of 64 feet per second is represented by this function, where h is the height in feet. So we know that the y-coordinate is directed in feet, and this is directed in time, which is seconds. Now, first thing is, this is not in standard form. To make it in standard form, the -16t squared must go first, and the 64t must go second. Find the time that it needs to reach its highest point. So if we were to graph this, I'm thinking it's going to look something like this. They want to know how high does it go in feet and how many seconds did it take for it to get that height. So there's two ways you can do this. You can either graph it using a graphing calculator like we just did, or you can use the Vertex formula. We know that A is -16, we know that B is 64, and C is 0. So to find the vertex, we're going to use -b over 2a. So we'll get -64 over 2 times a -16, which will give us -64 divided by a -32, which is a +2. In order to find the y-coordinate of the vertex, so we now know the vertex is at 2 and we don't know the y value. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug 2 into that, plug 2 into t to find that y value. So we'll get -16 times 4 plus 128, because 2 squared is 4. -16 times 4 is -64 plus 128 is 64. So we know the vertex is 264. So what we know is this means that it reaches a height of 64 feet, and that happens at 2 seconds. The x-coordinate gives you how many seconds it took. The y-coordinate tells you how many feet it reached. Last, the height in feet of a ball thrown by a child is given by this equation. How high is the ball when it leaves the child's hand? Oh, they're wanting to know the y-intercept in this case. And then how high is the ball when it reaches its maximum height? If we were to graph this, this negative tells me that it's going to open down. And so we know it's going to look something like this. This is going to be the max height. This point is going to be the height at the beginning. So at time 0, they want to know when it leaves the child's hand. So at the very beginning, right when the child throws it, they want to know how high is that ball, which is the y-intercept. So to find number 1, we are going to plug 0 in for x. So we will get -1/12 0 squared plus 2 times 0 plus 4, which will give us 4. So that means y equals 4. So at the very beginning, the ball is 4 feet high. Number 2, how high is the ball when it's at its maximum height? So we're wanting to know the max height. So what we're going to do is do negative b over 2a. A represents negative 1/12, b represents 2, and c represents 4. So negative b, which is 2, divided by 2 times negative a. So we'll get negative 2 divided by negative 2 over 12. This is where KFC comes into play because we're dividing by a fraction. So we're basically doing negative 2 divided by negative 2/12. So we keep the first, flip the second, and change it to multiplication, which will give us a positive 12 because negative 2 and 2, they divide out, and negative times a negative gives you a positive. That represents our x coordinate, so we know that 12 seconds is when it's going to reach the max height, but it wants to know what is that max height. So what we do is we plug 12 back into our equation, so we'll get negative 1/12 times 12 squared plus 2 times 12 plus 4. So we get negative 1/12 times 144 plus 24 plus 4. Negative 1/12 times 144 is negative 12 plus 24 plus 4, which will give us 16. So therefore, we know that after 12 seconds, the max height is going to be 16 feet.